Okay, now I'm starting the lecture. I hope everyone is good. So now, this lecture is for your histology, general histology, and the part which we are covering today is cartilage and bone. In general, you all have heard about the bone and cartilage. Okay, so basically, bone is the rigid part, and cartilage is the semi-rigid part that we can say in a simple language. Okay, so now what are we going to learn from this lecture? So our learning outcomes are to define cartilage and its importance, to describe various type of cartilage, to learn histogenesis of cartilage, to describe the structure of bone, to identify various cells of bone, and to learn the histogenesis of bone formation. Okay, now I'll start one by one. Now, basically, if you are talking about the bone and the cartilage, they comprises your skeletal system. Okay, so the skeletal system is formed by a highly specialized type of supportive or connective tissue. Okay, now the tissues are basically made up of collagen and acellular matrix. So there are two things, they are basically made of collagen and your acellular matrix. Now acellular matrix as well as the cells that are responsible. For example, there are different sets of cells for your cartilage, different set of cells for your bone. So it basically comprises of your collagen, your acellular matrix, and the cells which synthesize them, which produce those tissues. Now, bone, if you're talking about, provides a rigid, protective, and supporting framework because bone is hard, it's rigid. The rigidity results from deposition of calcium salts within the collagen in the matrix. Now, if you are talking about the cartilage occurs in different forms and provide a smooth articular surface at bone ends as well as structural support in special areas. Now, if you're talking about the basic difference, one important basic difference between cartilage and bone is if you see cartilage, it's semi-rigid and bone is rigid. That is one difference. Now, why bone is rigid and cartilage is not so rigid? Because of the deposition of the calcium salts. So there are certain inorganic minerals that are involved in bone that makes it rigid. So that is the basic difference. Now, if you're talking about the cartilage, so cartilage is basically it acts as a supportive structure. So it is usually present at the end of the bone to help in the articulation of the bone, to provide the support. And in certain areas, for example, in our ears or in trachea, they are basically made up of cartilage. So it is also important in one form of new bone formation that we will get to know. Now we are talking first about cartilage. It's a modified connective tissue. It is firm but not rigid. So it's a difference. It is firm but it is not rigid. You cannot bend it. Okay. Embryologically derived from mesenchyme, cells are widely separated by intercellular substance. Firmness of cartilage and hardness of bone is because of nature of ground substance in them. So this is one important thing. Now fetal skeleton. So if we are talking about the fetal skeleton, so that is basically predominantly cartilaginous. Now, what are the functions of cartilage? So it provides skeletal framework. First is this. Second is flexibility. So it provides you the flexibility. How does it provide the flexibility? By basically it attaches to the end surface of the bone and helps in the articulating movements of the bone. Therefore, it provides the flexibility. Provides gliding area for the joint. So there are different joints in our body if you are aware. So once we flex our hands or move our wrist or turn our toes, so those are the joints areas. So in those joints areas it provides the gliding means to for the smooth movement, for the smooth twist and bend that we used to give. Now it is essential for the growth of the long bones. How? Because that I'll explain you in the later part of the chapter. If I'll explain you in here, you will get confused. So far, function is clear to all of you. Say yes. Okay. 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 Now, what is it? important for? It is important support soft tissues, formation of growth of long bones, durability of articular joints that we have already discussed. Now, what does it consist of? So, what are the cartilage made of? First is the cells. So these are called as your chondroblast and chondrocyte. Remember that. Cartilage are derived from the cells, chondroblast and chondrocytes. Then it has collagen, as we have already discussed. Then it has glycosaminoglycans. Okay. Then it has proteoglycans. This is again one important feature. And this proteoglycans contains proteoglycan aggregates. Okay. And then water. So basically it has cells that those are chondroblast and chondrocytes, collagen, and then we have glycosaminoglycans, then we have proteoglycans, which consists of your proteoglycan aggregates and your water. Now the semi-rigid nature. Now here you need to understand that why bone is rigid and cartilage is semi-rigid. So you will able to understand in this slide. Okay. The semi-rigid nature of cartilage stems from the predominance of proteoglycan ground substance. That is why I told you in previous slide that proteoglycan is again one important thing. So the semi-rigidity that you get in cartilage and the rigidity that you get in the bone. So semi-rigidity is because of proteoglycans, and these proteoglycan, they secrete or you disposed of proteoglycan aggregates which make up the ground substance and account for solid yet flexible consistency of the cartilage. So hope you understand that. Okay. Now there are different types of cartilage based upon the amount and the nature of the fibers that are present in it. Which fibers we are talking about? Collagen fibers. So it is basically three types. Now it is important for you to remember: hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage. So there are three types of cartilage: hyaline, fibro, and elastic cartilage. Now, what are the cellular structures of cartilage? Cellular structures, as we have discussed, there are two cells that are very important for formation of cartilage. That is your chondroblast and chondrocyte. If I have to put in a very simple word to you, the basic difference between chondroblast and chondrocyte is chondroblasts are immature cells and chondrocytes are mature cells. So what happened is, firstly, chondroblasts are formed. These chondroblasts then mature and they are arranged in lacunae. If you can see in this picture, if I can point that out, uh, okay, if I can point this area, if you can see the pointer, yes. So that area is called as lacunae, and inside this, the hollow cell that you are seeing are your chondrocyte. Okay. Now, if you look into the above section, this is your chondroblast. So these cells are small. These cells are big. They are looking very mature. They are looking immature. Okay. So now, if we discuss this slide, basically it consists of your chondroblast. These are the immature cartilage cells. They secrete extracellular matrix, but the basic difference is that they are not imprisoned in lacunae. Lacunae is basically a shell, you can say, a covering. So if you can see, these all are lacunae. These all are lacunae. Can you able to see the pointer or not? Okay. So those are the things. Then chondrocytes, these are mature cartilage cells. That's what I told you. And they are embedded in extracellular matrix and they reside in the lacunae. Okay. Now what is perichondrium? Perichondrium is most mature cartilage masses acquires a surrounding layer called the perichondrium. Now peri, if you see, or if you want to remember the meaning of the term, it is always important to break the term and then understand it. Peri means surrounding. Chondrium means related to cartilage. So the area that is surrounding the cartilage is perichondrium. So most mature cartilage masses acquires a surrounding layer called the perichondrium. So it is basically a layer. Consists of what? It consists of collagen fibers, spindle shaped cells which resemble your fibroblasts. So if you can see this area, this entire area, this is your perichondrium. Okay. Now what is the use of it? Why we are discussing about it? Because they have the capacity to transform into chondroblast and form new cartilage. So that is important. What is their role? Why they are around? Because whenever it is needed, they will form chondroblast, and chondroblast will in turn form your chondrocytes, and chondrocytes will lead to formation of your cartilage. So this is a chain. So if we are asking about the cellular structure, you have to remember chondroblast, chondrocyte, perichondrium. Okay. Now, what are the types of cartilage that I have already told you? There are three types: hyaline, fibro, and elastic. Now, hyaline is basically translucent to bluish white in color. So it is basically see-through, like bluish white in color. Now, this is very important in embryonic formation and later growth of the long bones. So when an embryo is formed, when a fetus is formed, it is important in that, and it is important in formation of the long bones. So we have in our body long bones such as femur, tibia. So all these are the long bones. An adult mainly found lining where they are found. They are found in outer wall of respiratory passage, that is your trachea. Okay, then your ribs and on the joints. So on the surface of the joints. Now this is the picture. Now again, if we look into this picture, the upper surface is your perichondrium. Now below the perichondrium, all you can see these structure, can you see inside? These are your lacunae. And inside your lacunae, you see a hollow cell, an empty cell having this blue color nucleus. So that is your chondrocyte. Okay. Now, if you can see into the diagrammatic representation, there is something written as isogenic group. What is isogenic group is when these chondrocytes, they join together, they form an isogenic group. For example, this picture, the one which I am pointing, this is an example of isogenic group. This is an example of isogenic group. Okay, so this is how your hyaline cartilage is made of. Now, elastic cartilage. Now, elastic cartilage is basically what? It has high concentration of elastic fibers. That is the difference. That is why it is called as elastic cartilage. Why? Because it has high concentration of elastic fibers. Now, ground substance, it is basically yellow in color. Chondrocytes are more closely packed. Why? If you can see into this picture, unlike if we go back to the hyaline cartilage, you see that chondrocytes, they are dispersed very in they are very away from each other. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. If you came late, that's okay, no problem, you can join. Now for the elastic cartilage, if you can see into this diagrammatic picture, they are very closely attached. Okay. Now see this picture. Can you see the picture? These all are your chondrocytes, these big cells that you are seeing, and in between these cells that you are seeing are your elastic fibers. So they are very closely packed, unlike hyaline cartilage. Now, fibrocartilage. These are an irregular, dense, fibrous tissue with thin, dispersed, encapsulated chondrocytes. So, in this, can you see all these lines that are going? They are so much dense. They are so much present that they are actually squeezing the chondrocytes. So, the chondrocytes are between these lines. So, contains very large bundles of collagen fibers. Now, what is their role? If there is any fibers in our body, the collagen fibers, if you are talking about, what is the main function of it? The main function is to resist compression. So if we are pressed, if our body is pressed, the collagen fibers will help in resisting the compression, and that is what these cartilage does. So wherever in our body, in the bones where compression is there, where you can, if you jump, then over to your heels, then over to your kneecaps, all those areas are where the compression is more. So in these cartilage will act more. Can you see this picture? These all thick bands that you are seeing are basically your collagen fibers. And in this, if you can see these small cells, this one, these all are your chondrocytes. So they are so thick that they are compressing the chondrocytes itself. Now coming to histogenesis. Now don't read this, you will get confused. I will show you from the diagram. Now what happened is that if when we have started the lecture, I have told you that these are basically your undifferentiated mesenchymal cells. Okay, so how does cartilage formation start? This is what we are going to discuss in this slide. In a very simple way, I'm going to explain it to you. So this is your undifferentiated. By the word undifferentiated means that you are not able to differentiate them, or you are not able to tell that these are the cells for bone, these are the cells for cartilage. You cannot tell them right now. They are undifferentiated. They are so immature. What happen is, so the mesenchymal cells differentiate to chondroblasts. So these mesenchymal cells, they differentiate to first stage is chondroblasts. So they form chondroblasts. Now chondroblasts, what they does is they secrete your extracellular matrix. What are the extracellular matrix? We have already discussed. If you remember the constituents, they contains glycosaminoglycans, proteoglycans. So these all are your extracellular matrix. So these chondroblasts, they secrete extracellular matrix and form lacunae, form a shell, and become chondrocytes. So that is, it starts from mesenchymal cells to chondroblast to chondrocytes. Now chondrocytes, they divide one or more times to form isogenic group. By that, if we mean, see this picture. This is individual cells. Now what this individual cells does, they divide, and they divide and form into this isogenic group. Then later on, each chondrocyte lays down matrix. So each of these chondrocytes, they are again laying down the matrix and spreading apart and forming a cartilage. Understood, all of you? Okay. So histogenesis, so that is your interstitial growth. Okay, now there is something called as appositional growth. This is very simple. Can continue after the perichondrium is formed. This is accomplished by chondroblast associated with the perichondrium secreting additional ground substance. So more important is basically your interstitial growth rather than your appositional growth. So this is about cartilage. Okay, now coming about bone. Now what is bone? If now try to differentiate bone from what we have just read is cartilage. So cartilage was not so rigid. Bone is rigid. So is a rigid form of connective tissue in which the extracellular matrix is same. Okay, remember that. Extracellular matrix of cartilage and bone is same. The only difference is involvement of inorganic salts. So the inorganic salts are involved, which are not there in cartilage. What are those inorganic salts? Calcium, phosphate, carbonate. Now these salts will provide hardness to the bone. And that is the basic difference between bone and cartilage. So in cartilage, you will not see these inorganic salts, whereas in bone, you will see these inorganic salts. Rigidity and hardness is provided by matrix which is impregnated with inorganic salts. I have already discussed you with this. Now bone, what is bone? Bone is a living tissue which makes up the body skeleton that you all know, and one of the hardest structure of animal body or human body, we can say. This is the hardest structure. It provides shape and support for the body. Obviously it does provide the shape. That is why some have a long bone, so they are much heighted. Some have short bones, so they are little heighted. So these all are the things. Then it provides site of attachment for tendons and muscles. Now this is again very important thing. Now bones provides the attachment for your ligaments, for your tendons to join with the muscles so that they move in coordination. That is why, if you remember, if any one of you while playing football or while doing anything might get hurt, so there are at times when there are no bone breaks, but you will have an intense pain. What is that pain? Is because you have a ligament tear, and you put a stress onto the bone, and that causes the tearing of the ligament, or injury to the ligament, if I can simplify it. So that is why it provides an attachment to your ligament, to your muscles. Okay, it provides the vital organs, it protects the vital organs of the body. So we have it, this is very obvious. We have vital organs like heart, like lungs, like liver, like pancreas. All these are shell inside the bone. So because of it, whenever an impact is there, or whenever there is a change in temperature or a sudden impact or an injury, it protects a vital organ. So these all are the functions of bone. Sorry. Yeah, now functions, as we have discussed, attachment to muscles, serve as lever for muscular action, that I also have told you, bears body weight, then protects vital organs, store calcium, phosphate and other ions. Now this is different. Contains hemopoietic tissue, that is your bone marrow. Now inside your bone there is a bone marrow, and that bone marrow will consist of your hemopoietic system. Hemopoietic system means blood. So it carries blood for the vitality of the bone. So that is again one important thing. Now classification. Now they are classified by three types. First is on the basis of the development, how they are developed. So there are two methods bone are developed. Endochondral bone formation or intramembranous bone formation. Always remember that. So endochondral bone and intramembranous bone. Histologically, how you differ them? Compact and spongy. Compact is also called as your cortical bone. Spongy is also called as your cancellous bone. Now it itself implies the term. If I'll ask you, is compact more rigid or spongy more rigid? What would be your answer? Very good. So if you know the term, it is easy for you to remember. And by shape, that is the third type. Whether they are long, whether they are short, whether they are flat, whether they are irregular, whether they are sesamoid. So there are different types. So you can classify them accordingly. Now, classification of bone. Endochondral bone and intramembranous bone. Now remember the term again. Endochondral. Okay, so it has something related to chondral, and we have just read chondral where it applies to cartilage. So endochondral bone formation, basically when bone is formed from the cartilage, that is your endochondral bone formation. So what happen is, first your cartilage is formed, then ossification starts in the cartilage, and that ossification will leads to formation of the bone. That is why it is called as endochondral ossification or endochondral bone. Then comes is your intramembranous. Now inter or intra is something that is your outside, so formed by replacement of sheet like connective tissue membrane with bony tissue. So what is in this is, there is a connective tissue, so that connective tissue sheet will turn into formation of bones. Okay. Now classification based on the shape. Now we have just discussed what is long bone. So basically long bones are some of the longest bones in the body. Which are those bones? Femur, those are your leg bones. Okay. Humerus, those are your arm bones, and tibia is also there, so one of the leg. Now here you need to focus on the part of the bone. Now see, remember, this is one bone. Okay, it has a proximal end and it has a distal end. Okay, proximal is one end and distal is one end. Now they are called as your proximal epiphysis, distal epiphysis. Now there is a center part. Center part is called as your diaphysis. So proximal epiphysis, distal epiphysis, and your diaphysis. There are three parts. Now what are inside? If you can see, the first marking is a spongy bone. Okay. Now if you look into the spongy bone, you will see that there are small holes present, right? Those are basically your trabeculae, and those trabeculae are the reason it is called a spongy bone. Now come to the compact bone. Can you see the marker? Come to the compact bone. Now in the compact bone, you do not see these small trabeculae, these dots. That is why it is called as your compact bone. Okay. Now do you remember that in the function I've told you that it also helps in hemopoiesis, in circulation, blood circulation. That is the middle part of the bone. So it is basically your medullary cavity. Okay. Then the lining of the bone is called as your periosteum. So this is the part of the bone. So if anybody asks you, if anybody in anatomy also gives you a bone, so you will say that it has a proximal end, it has a distal end, and it has a middle end. The proximal end is called as proximal epiphysis, distal end is called as distal epiphysis, and your center part is called as your diaphysis. Now what is inside the bone? There are two main parts that are present inside the bone. First is your spongy bone, second is your compact bone. Now what is the basic difference? The basic difference is the presence of trabeculae. Trabeculae are present, those are present in the spongy bone, where those are absent in the compact bone. Then what is the outer covering of the bone? Outer covering of the bone is called as periosteum. Again, split the term and remember it. Peri means surrounding, osteum means bone. So the layer that surrounds bone is called as your periosteum. Understood? Okay. Okay. Now coming up to short bones. Short bones basically defined as being approximately as wide as they are long. By that it means that, see, go back to the long bone. They are not wide, they are long. But in case of your short bone, they are wide, as wide as the wide they are long. So basically they are as wide as they are long. So they have primary function providing support and stability. Now what are the examples? Examples are bones of your hands, that these are called as your metacarpals, okay, these areas, and tarsals. Now coming up to flat bones. Flat bones are again one of the important bones. Why? I'll tell you. Flat bones, as they sound, are strong. Firstly, they are flat plates of bone with main function. Their main function is to provide protection to the body vital organs. That is why they are important. Now, which all are the flat bones? Your scapula, that is your shoulder bone, okay, blade. Then sternum. Sternum is basically your breastbone. So it's a bone that is present right in the middle. Okay. Now, why it is important? Because it protects your heart. Your heart is inside the sternum bone, okay. Then your hip bone and your pelvis, this is your hip bone or pelvis areas, and your ribs. So these all are your rib cages. So they help in protection of any injury, they help protecting the heart. That is why flat bones are again important. Now coming up to irregular bones. Now when they do not classify into any category, for example, when they are not long bones, when they are not short bones, when they are not flat bones, when they are in any shape, they are called as irregular bones. Now what are those bones? Most importantly is your vertebra. So you all know your spinal cord. Your spinal cord are made up of vertebrae. So these all are the vertebrae. Now then your sesamoid bone. Now, sesamoid bone is a special type of bone, are usually short. So, if you can see this bone, this is short, irregular, and embedded in tendon. Can you see these muscle structure? This muscle-like structure. This is your tendon. So, basically, the sesamoid bone is your kneecap. You all know what is kneecap, right? So, that is your sesamoid bone. So, these all were your types of the bones. Now this is one big picture that will tell you everything what we have discussed. So can you see this? So this is one of the long bone. Okay. This is your femur. Okay. This is your humerus. This is your tibia. This is your femur. This is your tibia. Okay. Then these all are your short bones. These all are your metacarpals. And if you can see the spinal cord, that is in green in color. So spinal cord is basically your made up of vertebrae. These all are your irregular bones. Now if you see the center part, this is your flat bone. And which bone this is? This is your sternum and your ribs also. And the main function is to protect your most vital organ, that is your heart. Okay, now what is the chemical composition? As we have discussed, it consists of your 60% inorganic and 30 and 25% organic material, and then rest is the water. 60% is inorganic and then your organic material. Now, what are cell types? As we have discussed the cell types in cartilage, the chondroblast, the chondrocyte, same applies in here, only the term is different. In here, as it is related to bone, so it is called as osteoblast. bone forming cell. Osteocyte is a mature bone forming cell. Osteoclast, now this is new. Osteoclast is bone resorption cell, or if I put it in a very simple word, bone eating cells. So they eat the bone. So these are the two are osteoblast and osteocytes helps in the formation of the bone. Osteoclast helps in the destruction of the bone. Now there is something else called as bone lining cells and osteoprogenitor cells. Now whenever the term progenitor comes means they have the capacity to transform into a osteocytes or osteoblast, and then they help in the formation of the bone. So now this is your osteoblast. Now what is osteoblast? It is mononucleated. Again the term mono means single, nucleus, nucleated. So single nucleus, if you see in this picture, this is one cell, this is another cell, and it has this blue color, single nucleus. That is your mononucleated cell. So they are responsible for bone formation. Are the synthetic cells of the bone which are involved in secretion of organic matrix of bone and also help in mineralization of uncalcified matrix. So they are very important. How they are important? First is they involve in the secretion of organic matrix. So organic matrix for what we have discussed, those they will try to secrete, that will help in formation of the rigidity of the bone, and they also help in mineralization of uncalcified matrix. So basically they are handling both organic matrix as well as your inorganic matrix. Now comes your osteocytes. So can you see these osteocytes? So they are again inside a lacunae. So they are, see, if you see this whole structure, pink structure, this is your bone. Now above that is your osteoblast. Can you see these? These are your osteoblasts. Now the cells which are entrapped within the bone and having a lacunae, these are called as your osteocytes. So osteocytes in lacunae. Okay. Now comes your osteoclast. Now osteoclasts are basically multinucleated. You remember osteoblast that was mononucleated. In here it is multinucleated. How? See, this is one osteoclast. It has one nucleus, two nucleus, three, four, five. That is why it is called as multinucleated. Now they are called as giant cells. What do you mean by the giant? Giant means big. So they are big cells. So they are multinucleated giant cells responsible for bone resorption. See, you have to understand two terms: deposition and resorption. Deposition means to deposit or form new bone. Resorption is to remove bone. Okay, so that is there. So they causes a resorption of the bone. How they do it? By removing the mineralized matrix and breaking up the organic bone. So if you take out the mineralized matrix out of the bone, they become very brittle. They are very easy to break. So that is why it is how it causes resorption. Now a question should come into your mind, or you should have asked that why, doctor, is there a need for a bone to be resorbed? Why do we want a bone to be resorbed? So the answer is that our bone formation and resorption is a continuous process, and it is very much needed. Why? Because if we do not have a bone resorption, there will be no new bone formation, and if there will be no new bone formation, the old bone, there will be continuous deposition of organic and inorganic material, and it what it causes, it causes the narrowing of the space. So everything in a body will only have bone. We do not have any space. This will not provide the space for the vital organs, for the other structures to grow. So that is why, Alhamdulillah, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has made such a process in our body that right now when we are talking, right now when we are discussing this lecture, the cells in our body are undergoing formation and destruction. The bone cells in our body also are going formation and destruction. So that is a nature, that is a miracle. If it wasn't been there, our skin would be very thick, our bones would be very hard, and they would have occupied all the structures inside our body, and it was very difficult for us to survive also. So that is why osteoclast is also important. Osteocyte and osteoblast is also important. The balance of bone formation and bone resorption is very important. Understood, all of you? Now, bone lining cells. Bone lining cells are inactive osteoblasts. So they are inactive. Why they are inactive? Because they are not needed. Only when there is a situation when they will get the signals that your work is required. We need you to come and form and help us in forming a new bone. So that is when they become active. Osteoprogenitor cells, as I've discussed with you, it's an undifferentiated cells. Again, undifferentiated means you cannot categorize it to a certain, maybe it's an osteoblastic cell or chondroblastic cell. These are undifferentiated cells found near or the free surface of the bone, which under certain circumstances undergo division and transform into osteoblasts and form osteoclasts. So that is what their function. Depending upon the need of our body, they awake, and then either they form into an osteoblast depending upon the need, or osteoclast. Now, bone histology, as we have discussed in the classification, the compact or cancellous bone. Compact, as the name suggests, also called as cortical bone, forms a cortex or outer shell of the most bones. Compact bone is much denser than cancellous bone or spongy bone. This is very obvious. Furthermore, it is harder, stronger, and stiffer than cancellous bone. So it is more harder, it is more stronger, and it is more stiffer. The primary anatomical functional unit of cortical bone is the osteon or Harvasian system. You have to remember that. So the primary functional unit where everything happens inside the compact bone is your osteon, or it is called as your Harvasian system. So this is your Harvasian system. Don't get scared about this. I'll just explain you. So basically this is a cut surface of the bone. For example, you have bone and I have cut it into the half, and now I am making you to see it. So basically this is the outer part of the bone, which is your periosteum. Then this is the inner lining of the bone, that is your endosteum. Okay, periosteum, outer lining, endosteum, here the lining of inside. Now it has three parts. Remember, outer circumferential lamellae, inner circumferential lamellae. These two are important. Okay. Now, outer, as the name suggests, they are mostly present on the outer surface. Inner, they are mostly present in the inner surface. Then there are something called as Walkman canal, Harvasian canal. What are their functions? To provide nutrients. So there are three layers. So basically circumferential, I don't know why it is looking like this in this. When I'll give you the PPT, it will be highlighted. It is showing somewhat different in this. So basically there is circumferential lamellae. So this is your circumferential lamellae. What does it does? It encloses the entire adult bone, forming its outer perimeter. That is why it is called as outer circumferential lamellae. Then concentric lamellae. Concentric means circle. So if you can see this, these all are your circles. So this is your concentric lamellae, make up the bulk of the compact bone and form the basic metabolic unit of the bone, that is your osteon. So if you see this one single structure, this is your osteon. Okay. Then interstitial lamellae. Interstitial lamellae, can you see these lines that are present in between this concentric lamellae? So these are called as your interstitial lamellae. They are interspersed, means they are present in between adjacent concentric lamellae and fill the spaces between them. That is their job. So when the concentric lamellas, they are apart from each other, so there has to be something to fill the space. So that space is filled by your interstitial lamellae. So remember these three terms. Circumferential lamellae, circumferential means circling, enclosing. Okay. Then concentric means circle, rings sort of, and interstitial means that are present in between. Functions we have already discussed. Now spongy bone. So that was compact bone. Now it is also called as cancellous bone or your trabecular bone. That is important. Trabecular. Now compared to compact bone, cancellous bone has a higher surface area but is less dense, less, it is softer, weaker, and less stiff. So opposite to what we have read about compact bone. Cancellous bone is highly vascular. Now, why are they vascular and not the compact bone? Because they have spaces in between them. They have trabeculae which help in the circulation and contains red marrow cells. The primary anatomical functional unit of cancellous bone is trabeculae. Now remember, the primary anatomical functional unit for compact bone is osteon, and the primary anatomical functional unit for spongy bone or cancellous bone is trabeculae. Now bone formation. Bone formation is basically called as osteogenesis. Again, break the term. Osteo applies for bone and genesis in general means formation. So formation of bone. It is the natural process. There are two main processes involved in bone formation. First is endochondral bone formation, ossification. Second is your intramembranous bone ossification. Okay. Endochondral is also called as intracartilaginous. I have already explained you briefly. So basically in endochondral, what you will do is the formation of bone in which a cartilage template is gradually replaced by bone matrix. In simple word, the formation in which the cartilage is formed first and that cartilage is transformed into bone. So that is the endochondral bone formation. So it is usually seen in the long bones. Now, what is intramembranous? The development of bone from tissue or membrane, as in the formation of the skull. So, you see such type of bone, the skull is the example. Now see this picture, don't get scared. Again, I'm telling you, this is the undifferentiated mesenchymal structure. Now inside that, what is happening? This leads to formation of your hyaline cartilage. So this is your hyaline cartilage. You remember we have discussed that it is slightly whitish to bluish in color. So this is your hyaline cartilage. Now inside hyaline cartilage, what is happening is that there is degeneration of the cartilage. Now that degeneration, what it will causes, it will causes the blood vessels to come, and this is your primary ossification center. Ossification means the first bone that will form will inside in this structure. Why inside in this structure? Because it has marrow, and inside the marrow there is a space for the blood to flow, and for the growth of any organ blood is very necessary because it carries oxygen also. So inside this, the bone formation will occur, then it will mature, then from there it will go to the ends, that is your proximal epiphyseal end and your distal epiphyseal end, and after that the entire structure will get converted into the bone. So this is how the bone formation will happen, and this is which type of bone formation? Endochondral bone formation. And this is your intramembranous bone formation. So this is inside a membrane. These are mesenchymal cells. Ossification occurs. These all will turn into osteoblast, osteocyte. Then they will lead to formation of new bone matrix. Then they will mature. They will form trabeculae. These trabeculae will have all these arteries to provide them the blood, and they will further mature and form a fully formed bone that you will see in skull. Now, last few topic, bone resorption. I have already explained you why you need resorption. Why is it important? So, bone resorption is a process involving the breakdown of bone by a specialized cell called as osteoclast. It occurs as a continual level inside the body, with the broken down bone being replaced by new bone growth. As people age, the rate of resorption tend to exceed the rate of replacement, leading to condition called as osteoporosis. That is why if you see yourself, you are so young, so you do not have any bone pain. But if you have any elderly person in your house, your grandfather maybe, they have difficulty in walking. Why? This is the reason. In them, what happen is that the bone resorption is exceeding. There is more bone resorption than bone formation, so that will lead to brittle or fragile bone, and the condition is called as your osteoporosis. Osteoclasts works by attaching themselves to individual bone and secreting compounds that will cause the dissolution of the matrix and the mineralization matrix also. Now, what happens is once they are dissolved, they either enter into the bloodstream or they are removed out of the body as a form of a toxins while you are doing your normal natural process like urination. Now, remodeling of the bone. Now, remodeling means that there has to be a continuous phase of resorption and formation. So that will helps in the keeping in the vitality of the bone. The process by which the overall size and shape of bone is established is referred to as bone remodeling. Now what happened is that there are two lines. Just these are the ending topics. After this the lecture will end. There are two lines, resting lines and reversal lines. Now these lines are formed and they have a reason to form. Resting lines is laid down rhythmically and resulted in formation of regular parallel lines. So what it shows that these are basically the rhythmic lines. And what does they indicate? That there is a rhythmic formation of the bone happening. So there is formation, destruction. So this rhythm is going on. Then there is something called as reversal lines. Reversal lines are basically the lines which will demarcate you between an area of new bone formation and between an area of bone destruction. It will make you sense when I'll show you the picture. Now, can you see these lines? If you see these lines, these are one line, two line, three line, four line, five line. So they are basically the lines. What they are representing, that there is a bone remodeling going on. There is a rhythmic formation of bone going on. Now this is your resting line. If you see very minutely the pointer that I am showing it to you, can you see this is one line? Now, there are two sides of the line. One side is very dark, one side is light. So the dark side is where there is bone formation is happening. The light side is where there is bone resorption is happening. Okay. So these are your resting line and reversal lines. And this indicates what? This indicates your bone remodeling. Understood? So guys, let's end our lecture. If there is anything that you need to ask, you can ask. We'll take a break of around 10 minutes and then you will log into your practical session so that we'll have a small demonstration of what we have read. I hope I know that histology to you must be difficult to understand initially, but I tried to make it as easy for you. So if you have any doubt, just ask me. Okay, so now I'm logging it out in here, and after that, we'll join in the other session. Okay, I'll exactly join at 4 o'clock. So you can also take a break for some time. Take care, well, guys.